The People's Platform.
I'm joining you from the 1864 limited edition restaurant at the beautiful Galle Hotel in Colombo. My guest tonight is an award-winning food writer and renowned restaurant critic who is in Sri Lanka as part of Gourmet Galle, which is a sister festival of the Galle Literary Festival. His latest book, Cooking with the Crown, Royal Recipes from Queen Victoria to King Charles III, explores the grandeur of royal cuisine, offering recipes that have graced coronations, state banquets, and intimate royal meals alike. We'll be having a comprehensive conversation with him. Tom Parker-Bowles, it's lovely to have you here in Sri Lanka.
Thank you for having me, and so nice to be back.
Tom, you just wrapped up a royal banquet as part of Gourmet Galle here at the Galle Hotel, which was a sold-out event. Take us through what this entailed.
Well, it seems very funny coming all the way to Sri Lanka, one of the world's great cuisines, to come and serve royal food and English food. But actually the whole point was to get these recipes. And the point of the book was, you think royal food, you think foie gras, you think caviar, you think haute cuisine, but really what it was trying to get all the recipes. It wasn't all complicated and complex. The royals ate just as normal food as we did. There were plenty of curries, there were plenty of roast beef and all that sort of thing. So dishes like Scotch broth or crab mousse, we wanted to take these ingredients, use local ingredients and British and French recipes. So it was all very interesting, yeah.
Tom, it's really interesting that you're interested in the concept of demystifying royal cooking. Speak to us also about the other intimate dinner that you hosted in Doonberg, Galle over the weekend.
That was, you go from Colombo, a big international city, which is, I was wearing a suit and very smart, and ambassadors and all the great and good of Colombo, well, perhaps not coming to see me. And then Galle, of course, was a bit more relaxed. Everything moves a bit more slowly. So the menu reflected that. And it was all sorts of sandwiches and small eats and, sitting overlooking the sea. And it was just a lot more relaxed. So again, it was taking the two, Gourmet Galle for me is about, celebrating the best, not just of Sri Lankan food and produce, but bringing chefs and food writers from all over the world to celebrate this great island. And so it was two very, Colombo and Galle. And so the menus were completely different, but they still had the same sort of royal dishes. But, one I was wearing, a shirt and relaxed trousers, and the other I was in a suit and, much smarter. So that was it, the two faces for me of Sri Lanka, the dynamic capital city, international, and the more relaxed coastal, heritage, beautiful heritage city too.
Tom, you have such an enviable job. I want to ask you about your book, but first tell us, food has this transformative power to evoke emotion, culture, and memories. You've spoken about your mother, Queen Camilla, cook traditional British food for you as a child. You've also spoken about prep school food being
yeah.
appalling.
Yeah.
And you now curate royal meals. From then to now, what in this journey has stood out for you?
Well, food for me, food is everything. Food is the prism through which you see history, you see economics, you see sociology, you know, everything. You know, we might not, you know, some people live to eat and some people eat to live. But, you know, we all eat. It's a one shared experience we have. You know, you have a bite of something, a bite of roast chicken that whisks you back to your childhood. My mother was a very good cook, very simple English food. English food gets a bad reputation, bland, boring, unspiced, dreary, and it can be that. You know, I admit it, there's a lot of bad English food, but it's really seasonal and ingredient based. So you take a beautiful chicken and you cover it with butter and you roast it so the skin is crisp and the flesh is sweet and succulent, and you serve it with gravy and, you know, baked potatoes. Simple but very, very good. But the ingredients have to be at their very, very best. But really, I go to sleep thinking about food. I wake up thinking about food. And for me to travel, you know, for the honor and the privilege of traveling the world and coming to different cultures, I go straight in. If I, you know, my French is bad, my Hindi's bad, my Cantonese is bad. I don't really speak many languages, but just pointing and rubbing, you know, the international language of food, of delight. You go, you sit down, you break bread. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. The moment you sit down and break bread together, that immediately brings you closer. It's the great human gatherer together. Food is everything.
Absolutely. And food plays such a key role in what is known as gastrodiplomacy.
Yes.
Food has the potential to heal wounds.
Absolutely. I remember once in Beirut, I went to a restaurant called Towlet, I think it was called. And in there you had a mixture of, you know, there were Palestinian women cooking and there were Israeli. You know, it strips away religion, it strips away class, it strips away everything. It's about, you know, the pleasures of cooking together and eating together. When you talk about the power of food, you know, going back to the book about cooking in the Crown, you know, royal food was as much about soft diplomacy, or souffle diplomacy as I call it. You know, it was, you know, the moment you get the world leaders around the table together, not talking about politics but talking about food, then people let their guard down. You know, things start to happen. Everything happens over lunch or dinner. You know, who wants to sit in a boring conference room with water and stale biscuits? You want to sit and eat, you know, sit and have a wonderful Sri Lankan breakfast and do some proper business.
Absolutely. Tom, having extensively traveled, having been exposed to different cultures, how do you grapple with a certain disconnect of the world's flavors and the world's spices when you juxtapose it with British food?
Not really, funnily enough, because you take each cuisine in its own right. All food is created by history, by climate, and by geography. And listen, you know, England has a long history, and not necessarily, you know, the one that we're always hugely proud of. You know, there are many things, but you know, you think of, for example, you think of the British version of a curry. Now, if we love our curries, but they're not curries perhaps that any Indian, let alone any Sri Lankan, would recognise. A chicken vindaloo in Britain is a very, you know, it's just a basic gravy, a curry gravy with tons of chili powder put in it. It bears no relevance to that great Goan dish made with pork and vinegar and the rest of it. A chicken madras is just one level down. So, you know, British Indian cooking is a particularly British thing. You know, you wouldn't, you know, if across India, regional India, you wouldn't recognize any of the dishes. It doesn't make it any better or any worse. It just makes it different. I love chili. I love spice. I cannot live without chili. I have a bottle of Tabasco on me at all times to, you know, first aid for aeroplane food. And so I need it. I need sambals, I need chili, I need fresh chilies, I need dried chilies, I need chili powder, because that for me, you know, gives it life and spice. Not so hot that I can't eat it. So, you know, every food culture is different, but every food culture is united by the idea of comfort food, what we ate growing up. You know, what do you eat when you're feeling sad or you're feeling lonely, or you're just, you know, what, you know, it's a taste of perhaps what your mother cooked or your father cooked growing up. We all share the same basic principles of food. It's just the ingredients and techniques are different.
Absolutely. Let's talk about your fantastic book. This was released just a few months ago.
Yeah.
Documenting food choices of royals across eras from Queen Victoria to King Charles III. What would you say is your favorite recipe of them all?
Gosh, there are some. I mean, what I loved was there's a lot of history in the book. So you have Queen Victoria, who everyone says, oh, she ate. You know, everyone was very polite. Of course, she was a queen. It was a time when the queen had absolute power. You know, she was Empress of India. She was sitting over this vast empire that is you know, quite rightly no longer there. But she liked to eat. She liked cakes and biscuits, and you know, she had a healthy appetite. Her son Edward VII was my hero. He could eat. He would have 10 to 12 courses for breakfast. Kippers, which is smoked fish, and kedgeree. There would be devilled kidneys. There would be sausages, and there'd be bacon, and there'd be eggs, and there'd be potted shrimps, and there'd be fried fish. And that was breakfast. Then at 11s, as a little snack, he'd have a lobster salad or half a roast chicken. Then lunch, 10, 12, 14 courses of high, sort of quail stuff with foie gras and more lobsters and crabs, salads. Then he would have tea. Now, tea is the one thing that still endures to this day with the royal family is tea. Everything stops for tea. So you don't just have obviously the great loose leaf tea. You would get sandwiches, you'd have cakes, you'd have scones, you'd have crumpets, you'd have potted shrimps, you'd have egg dishes. This is a meal that we could probably live on eating this once a day alone. They'd have that tea. And then 3 hours later, there'd be a 12 to 14 course dinner of very rich, of foie gras and the caviars and, the greatest haute cuisine of those chefs. They had a kitchen of sort of 54 chefs. This was the very height of haute cuisine, of Escoffier sort of food, drenched in cream and butter. So how they managed to get through a day eating this much food, but he would eat it without blinking. So I thought, this was wonderful. But in terms of the dishes, I like the simple dishes, that the royal family ate. They love the French food. They also love roast beef, game pie, kedgeree, this fantastic rice, which comes from katri, sort of, a lentil dish. There are so many different dishes. Goujons with sole, delicious fish, and then you just pane them in breadcrumbs, fry them. So it was really, this is a cookbook for cooking for people like me, an amateur cook. Sorry, I'm hitting my microphone here. A cookbook for cooking. It's not going to be one of those sort of Michel Roux, Heston Blumenthal, Gordon Ramsay books that you look at and you read, but you think, oh, you need a kitchen of 40 to do that. And you need to have done 20 years in a kitchen. No, this is a cookbook. So it's about good, simple, honest food. But so I would go through all history and see what they're eating and go, oh, that looks nice, Scotch broth or Irish stew, or, and just put the things that I liked and I could cook.
You've also listed out several recipes from your mother, Queen Camilla, in your book. Could you speak about them and the memories that they evoke?
Well, everyone forgets that my mother, before she was married to my stepfather, she brought up 2 children. We lived in the country in Wiltshire, which is about 2 hours from London. My father was a very good gardener. So we'd have asparagus and peas and strawberries and, rhubarb. So we knew the seasons. He also fished, so we'd always have trout and salmon, and he shot, so we'd have pheasant and grouse and partridge. So we understood, without knowing we understood from a very early age, what food was in season when, and the bounty, the great wild bounty of Britain. And my mother was a good, simple cook. She couldn't make a cake, she couldn't make bread, she didn't follow recipes. But like most mothers, I'd say to her, how do you make that? You just make it, she would all be in her head. So whether it was roast chicken or, which I always talk about her roast chicken because that's the sort of dish she loved, but she would do soups and stews and fish. So she was a really, really good cook. She cooks less now. Scrambled eggs, very good at scrambled eggs. Very slow, that's the key. Lots of butter, fresh eggs, and you don't do it quickly. You have to do it so slowly over a low heat. So it sort of goes into wonderful, rich curds rather than that horrible sort of commercial, dried up, chewy stuff that you get on aeroplanes and in bad hotels. So we had a very happy food upbringing. So I've got recipes from her. She likes things like, she eats very lightly now. So for lunch, it will be a chicken broth with spring vegetables in. Her porridge she has every morning. There are certain puddings, she likes ice cream and things like that. So it was just getting little things that not sometimes she cooks and sometimes she eats. So it was just to give a taste of what she likes.
Okay. You've experienced both the glamour of high-end cuisine and the simplicity of home-cooked meals. If you had to choose a meal that best encapsulates your personal relationship with food, what would it be?
I would say I'm far happier sitting on a wobbly plastic stool in the middle of a street market among the diesel fumes and cigarette smoke and the bustle and hustle of the market, eating an oyster omelette in Thailand or some, mutton rolls here or, noodles or a pho. For me, the food of the street is the soul of any country. And I'm really, to be honest, happier eating that sort of food with lots of chili and lots of spice and lots of herbs than I am sitting in a 3 Michelin star restaurant with caviar and everyone dressed in suits and 42 courses of food that you don't know what it is and you have to be explained, someone has to explain what it is. And, I respect the great chefs. I respect haute cuisine. I like it now and again, but give me real food. Real food on the street any day of the week. That's what I like to eat.
Tom, something that I want to ask you is there's a lot of elitism and classism that comes with fine dining.
Yeah.
But here you are deconstructing that. I'd love to know your thoughts.
Well, I think elitism is bad in every way. Listen, I've been born lucky. I was born by pure luck. I was born into a family. I had a very happy upbringing. I went to the best schools. I went to a school called Eton, a school called Oxford. That's pure luck. And my parents always said, just remember, only by luck are you here. Don't ever think that it's because you're someone special, something special. You work, you respect, you say please and thank you, manners and respect for other people. So that translates into food as well, that, you have the high, and I wouldn't say the low, but there's just as much art in making a perfect noodle soup. The broth, the noodles, all the different, sauces and things you put into it, as there is creating a 30-course tasting menu. But like I say, I respect both. We live in a world where you can have both. I hate elitism. I hate snobishness. I do call it the tyranny of the tasting menu when you're stuck and there's 50 courses and there's another one and another one. I know this sounds spoiled, but I just like, I like a menu where you have that, please. So yes, I think anywhere that you're made to feel uncomfortable or people look down on you, that's awful. That's rubbish. And those places should be destroyed. Food is not about snobism. It's not about elitism. It's not about classism. It is about bringing people together, food. It should not drive people apart. It should bring people together.
Okay. Let's also talk about the intersection between food and health.
Yeah.
As you grow older in your profession, what are the realizations?
Oh, tell me about it. God, as I get older, I used to, eat as much as I wanted and not have to worry about anything. And the doctor goes, "Ooh, cholesterol, blood pressure, and you shouldn't be doing this and you shouldn't be." And, you realize, I think your body, you have to listen to your body. Now, when I was 18, 19, 20, I like to party and, dancing and all the rest of it. And as you get older, you can't. You have to, if it's walking, you have to do a little bit more exercise. You cannot live on hamburgers and pizza alone. Okay, and I don't think I'd want to live on hamburgers and pizza alone. I love hamburgers. I love pizzas. I do Pilates. I do exercise. I don't like the gym, but I have to do it. And also if I say drinking, I try not to drink 3 or 4 days a week. As one gets older, you sleep better without drink. You have less of the, oh God, what did I do last night? The hangovers get harder. I think you move towards a self-realization that everything in moderation. I wasn't very good in moderation in my younger years. But as you get older, my children will say, Daddy, your tummy's getting too big or whatever. And you realize it yourself. You've got to look after yourself. And I do realize that more and more and more. And I do things like Pilates. That's not running around on some ghastly running machine. It's slow. So yes, I do exercise and drinking less and perhaps, eating less rich food. I love rich foods. I love alcohol, but you realize you're mortal and you don't live forever and you have children and you have to look after yourself.
Yeah.
So I try.
This is your second visit to Sri Lanka. In terms of the food that you've experience, what sort of stands out?
I mean, I must say, and I'm not just saying this to sort of say, hey, I'm a Sri Lanka and I'm sucking up. I think it's absolutely one of the great cuisines of the world. Just breakfast, just start with breakfast, you know, hoppers and,
Yeah.
and you know, eggs and the curries and the rice. In London, wherever, you know, wherever there's a good immigrant community, there's good food. And in parts of northwest London, especially Wembley, I live in West London, there's a big Sri Lankan community. Wherever there's a Sri Lankan community, there's going to be good food. So I learned growing up about Sri Lankan food without even coming to Sri Lanka.
Right.
So, you know, you'd have all your black pork curries and your, you know, your deviled prawns, your deviled cashew nuts and your small eats and all the things that I love. And what happened in Britain recently is that it was very much family-owned restaurants, traditional Sri Lankan food, you know, curry and rice and the rest. And then, of course, it became very trendy. And sometimes it's a worry when it becomes trendy because a trend by its very nature means transient and quick. But actually what's happened is we're getting these very high-end Sri Lankan restaurants now. Rambutan, for example, in Borough Market, that is magnificent.
Yeah.
And actually the owner was here last year,
Yeah.
Cynthia. And what they're doing is taking the best British ingredients, the best pork, and putting it, you know, and mixing it with Sri Lankan spicing and Sri Lankan technique. And then you're just lifting it up perhaps a level. You're putting it in a restaurant like this, you know, which is all quite smart and cool and the rest of it. And that's great. That's what should happen to great cuisines. So I wouldn't like to say that Sri Lanka's having its moment in the UK. It's always had its moment and it always will have its moment. It's a great food. But to come here and to come and eat crab, you know, and to all these dishes that I've had versions of in the UK, but to come and eat them properly here is magnificent. As you can probably see, I'm very greedy and I'm extremely excited, you know, from the past few days, Gourmet Galle, and doing it at this wonderful hotel here. And I just want to get out and eat. You know, there's only a limited amount of time in the day and I don't want to waste a moment of it. If I'm here for a week, just go and eat.
There's an ongoing conversation surrounding food sustainability and ethics. There's a rise in plant-based diets. How do you think this all fits in?
I mean, sustainability is of crucial importance, of course. And I think if you talk about Brillat Savarin, that great French philosopher, you know, tell me what you eat and I'll tell you who you are. You are what you eat is what it's translated into. We have to be conscious of where our food comes from. You know, we can't, for me, industrialized farming is an absolute horror. It's short term, it's myopic. I think regenerative farming is a big thing now. Is start with the soil, look after the soil. Do not keep on chucking fertilizers and pesticides. That's very short term. The big chemical companies want you to do this, you see. They want you to buy their chemicals and buy their fertilizers, but it's ruining the soil. We have to go back to small farms, small farmers, knowing where our produce comes from and ensuring that it is the animals are looked after in the best possible way. They live good lives. Happy animals make happy eating.
Do you ever get fed up of food?
No. Sometimes I eat too much and I lie there going, oh, I've eaten too much. But no, food, no, never. I feel so lucky to have a job where I can travel the world and talk about food, not politics or history or the rest of it, but food. And as going back to my thing, if you love food and you meet someone else who loves food, language, religion, nothing else matters. You bond over food, only connect.
As a food critic, how do you ensure that your critique goes beyond taste and looks to also capture the emotional and cultural essence of the meal?
Wow, that's what you hope. You know, there's the great food critics, people like sort of, you know, A.A. Gill in our country, who's sadly dead. But yes, the great critics go beyond just this is food. You know, when you go to a restaurant or you go to a street food store, it's not just, well, let's say a restaurant more, it's not just about the food. You could go to a restaurant with the best food in the world, but if the service was awful and the room was horrible and it was all uncomfortable, you wouldn't go back. A great restaurant is about so much more than just food. You know, food matters, of course, but it matters about the atmosphere, the lighting, the decoration, the sort of acoustics, the service. All these things come together to create a great place. So what you try to do, you try to capture as a food critic. You know, we all eat, we all have an opinion on food. Why should you listen to my opinion on food? You know, you hope that 25 years of saying, well, I've been to 500 of these restaurants and this one's good and this one's bad, but also to capture the essence. You want you hope your reader to be sitting with you at the table, you know, to be eating with you and to be having a good time with you, or conversely, to be, you know, say, don't go near this restaurant, it's rubbish. So yes, that's what you hope. I mean, when you describe it like that, that's what the greats do. And I certainly wouldn't describe myself as great, but you can aspire to greatness, even if you don't get to greatness.
Tom, food is a great connector. We're hosting this interview here at the beautiful Golfe Hotel, which has a 160-year history. You yourself are in Sri Lanka attending the Gourmet Galle Festival. How important is it for all the stakeholders to societally converge using food as a conduit to bring people together?
It's of such huge importance that we're sitting here, as you say, in the Golfe Hotel, one of the great hotels of Colombo, and one of the most famous hotels in the world. So you're sitting here in history. You're sitting with Gourmet Galle. Gourmet Galle brings, like the Galle Literary Festival, it brings people from around the world, chefs around the world, food writers from around the world, but more importantly, to Sri Lanka. It's not, this is about coming to Sri Lanka, experiencing the food, experiencing the ingredients, experiencing the culture. We come as tourists. We come to learn. Every single day I learn. And the older I get, the less I actually know. So it is so important when you think of Gourmet Galle and of course, you know, the Golfe Hotel, that you're coming to experience history and the past, but also one foot in the past and also one eye on the future, because food is always evolving. Food is always changing. So to come and see what's happening at the cutting edge of Sri Lankan food, as well as the traditional Sri Lankan food, is always fascinating. But the most important thing is we all eat. Food is a wonderful thing. Food is this great connector. And, you know, eat, drink, and be happy. That's what I care about.
Beautiful. Tom Parker Bowles, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
The People's Platform.
TV1. TV for life.
In the heart of Anamadur, lives are changing. For years, patients traveled miles for life-saving treatments, but not anymore. Galle renovated a building to establish a dialysis unit at the Anamadur Base Hospital and constructed another building to house a medical-grade water purification system. Galle, for the people, by the people.
Hopefully it's my last.
My dear friends, here we are, all in our true colors. Ito sabi pa siyo kitu ng vuliki.
Every day, millions face the impossible. What happens when clean water feels out of reach? When an entire village is left helpless? When it seemed like no one is listening, Galle saw the need. Galle took action and a community fought back. A water purification system for a village that once had none. Galle, for the people, by the people.
Talofa lava and welcome to That Pacific Sports Show. In our last episode of the Manawave series, we profile athletes and coaches as they pursue their dreams. Today, we dive into the world of high performance coaching and see what it takes to lead a national netball team.